A first-year MBA student at the MIT Sloan School of Management. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. We've got a great competitive advantage talk today. A focused approach to data analytics, maximizing player performance, presented by Catapult. Joining us today is Brian Kopp, who's the head of Catapult for North America, and Ted Ellickson, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing, Player Development at XOS Digital. And I'll hand the microphone over to Brian.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. This is primarily Ted's presentation, so I'll get to turn it over to him and he can talk. But I want to kind of describe how XOS and Catapult ended up on the stage together. For those that don't know, Catapult is the leading athlete wearable device company globally. We work with a lot of different sports, a lot of different teams, and a lot of what we do is focused very much on player safety, wellness, that type of data. When I first joined the business, it was very much around how can we connect that back to translating to the coaching staff. And the leaders in that space is XOS. A lot of what they do is video analytics for coaches at a lot of different sports, primarily NFL and college football, NHL, a few other areas. So bringing our data and their video assets together, we started that on the product side. So known Ted for a long time and knew how good they were with video, knew that they could take our data, really make it look amazing, translate to the coaching staff. So that was how we ended up coming together on the product side. And then that led to an acquisition, which turned out great, because again, Ted and team at XOS are really good at what they do. We're really good at what we do on the athlete tracking side. But what Ted's going to talk about is really how the genesis of taking data off athletes, how that's kind of come to be, and where the future is in terms of translating that to coaches. And a lot of coaches in a lot of sports, their language is video. That's what they use, that's what they analyze, that's what they use on a daily basis. So for us, the future is connecting the dots of what kind of information do coaches and teams rely on every single day. And two of the main pillars are video and increasingly data and wearable data athlete analytics. So bringing those two together was really a strategy. We're really excited about what the future is, and that's really what Ted's going to get into. So I'm going to turn it over to him and listen and answer questions.
All right. Thanks, Brian, for your intro. I want to start out with kind of a personal story of how I see metrics today, how I've seen them in the past, and why I see them from a certain perspective. So if you go back to 1996, I was finishing up my first year as a graduate assistant offensive coach. I had a young, up-and-coming head coach named Nick Saban at Michigan State. We go through a full season. I'm doing my opponent scouts, doing a great job. I'm obviously getting some nice, colorful analysis from the head coach as we go throughout, as I had my learning process. So I knew what I had to have done, when I had to have it done, how I had to have it done. Okay, it's cell scout time. I spend 2 full weeks, coaches are out recruiting, I'm gonna have this thing perfect. So I know if there's a mistake, Nick's gonna find it in 30 seconds. He gets back, I hand him this, it's a 3-ring binder, it's about 1 inch thick, several hundred pages of every way we could look at ourselves. Here you go, coach. Go ahead and let me know if there's any feedback, if there's anything you want me to change. Opens it up, turns the page. This is wrong. Like, what's wrong with it, coach? I've gone through all this stuff multiple times. Now, Derek Mason had 5 catches for another 138 yards in the bowl game. This is the same stats he had after the Penn State game. Why didn't you do the bowl game? I'm deer-eyed. Coach, I took all the stats right from the Big Ten site. Let me go back, double check, maybe the Big Ten didn't update. I start making phone call. I get to the right guy at the Big Ten, says, no, we've never included bowl game stats in the season. That's not our policy. The policy is regular season are the official stats. Go back and tell coach this. I said, I'm glad that's a Big Ten policy. That's not my policy. Go add all the bowl game stats to everyone's numbers. So I got to go out, get all the individual results from all the bowl games, put them in, come give it to them. Here you go, coach. Here it is with all the numbers. And he's like, well, did you get the Big Ten to change so this is going to be there? I was like, no, I just did it manually. He said, no, that's not acceptable. So he joins the committee, and a year later, the Big Ten adds bowl game stats to the conference. right? You fast forward a couple of years, 2000, I get a call from who had been my former student for 4 years as an undergrad, is now a year one GA down at LSU, a kid named Adam Gase, now the head coach of the Dolphins. Adam calls me, hey, Nick just ripped me. I did the season-ending stats. He told me the bowl game stuff isn't there. We'd always done to Michigan State. He said, how'd you do that? I said, manually. We had to do it every year. So Adam had to go back, redo all his stuff, had the exact same experience. Nick now joins the national group, and 2 years later gets bowl game stats included everywhere. So both myself and Adam, who had decent careers, felt really good about the reports we were supposed to do, thought we could believe in the data, and just got buried by it. So for me, from that point on, and for a lot of the guys in the industry, you learn quickly, you gotta make sure that the coaches agree and believe in the data, and so you better know it forward and backwards. You better know what were the definitions, what are the boundaries, are there bowl games included in it? They are now everywhere, but I didn't know that at the time, so I exposed myself. Right? It was a very important lesson for me to learn early on. So to understand metrics of where we're going today, you always got to look at where did we start, right? If you don't understand the past, you're going to repeat the mistakes. I'd rather you not repeat the mistakes and have the colorful language I got to receive. The good thing is, you guys can heckle me all you want today. You're not getting through this skin that Nick's helped toughened up, right? So the first thing that we all had is there's two different types of metrics that have been used heavily for a long time. Observed metrics, I'm watching video, I'm watching practice, I'm writing things down. Or laboratory simulation, true kinesiology studies. To look at where did the observed metrics start with, really the sport advanced tremendously with film, literal film. Where did the term cut up come from? We took film, I was lucky enough late in my high school career to still have film. We cut it, you took a clothespin, you hung it on a line. At the end of the line, it said trap. It was a big 8.5 by 11 taped onto it. There were no sticky notes, right? So you had clotheslines filling a room. If we had to cut up, here's the traps, here's the counters, here's the powers. Once you cut all that film apart, you taped it back together again. And we tried to write down notes on chalkboards, later whiteboards, pieces of paper. There were no analytics in a computer yet. You get into the early to mid 90s, and now you start adding some empirical data to this stuff, because now you've got tape to tape, VHS and beta tape, and programs like Athlotech where I can write in a few different pieces of information and I can have a time code that says you'll find it at this point in the tape. Great, now we're talking. Now, what's empirical data? Real easy stuff, right? Down, distance, yard line. We then, as we got to track more and more data, wanted to add more subjective information to that. Well, now we're getting into, what's the formation, what's the play, what's the personnel? It seems like 13's 13 if I have 3 tight ends on the field. What if Jimmy Graham's one of those tight ends? My staff says he's a tight end. The defense says he's a wide receiver. When I'm standing, if this is my football field, here's the 2 hashes. I'm in the left hash. I'm offense. For all of you, I'm in the right hash. So is it empirical or is it subjective? So again, understand the data you have and how your staff perceives that data. Because when you make assumptions in life, you're wrong, right? It's just about communicating with the guys of, great, we're tracking all this stuff. And by the way, every one of these fields so far, the coaches asked for. I want to see X. Okay, coach, I need to go back and record this, this, and this piece of data. Okay, when you record it, if I say 21 personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end, Nick Saban would say, blue, which colors? We don't do numbers. So again, even though it is an empirical field, I have to make sure I have the right verbiage. And so for data analysts, this is tough. Not because the data stuff, it's really easy data, but no one has any consistency, right? All our beautiful bow ties in the front here from Clemson, they don't agree with any of the calls that Nick Saban makes because it's different verbiage on their staff than it is at Alabama, right? So even if it's the exact same data, now if I want to compare this to that to this, I have to homogenize things first. I have to understand what were they referred to as. Now, when you move from that team by team, there is no overall data, to let's look at it in a bigger picture. The last few years, third-party data has been huge, right? Companies like Stats, where I first met Brian, Pro Football Focus. These guys are putting in okay, now I have consistent data across leagues. And this is not just unique to football. This is all sorts of different companies in different markets are using this stuff. You have definitions provided by these guys. Burn defender. How do you say burn defender if you don't know who the coverage responsibility was? Well, they have a very nice definition of if the receiver is within 2 yards of the person that caught the ball, that's the burn defender. The coaches go, well, no, that's BS. And you say, well, wait a minute, coach. I can give you, instead of looking at 256 games times 2 perspectives for one NFL season, and you got to look through those 40,000 plays, I'm going to give you 87 results. And there may be 8 false positives in there. I saved you a whole lot of time. So now the coaches start to say, all right, maybe there is some use to these metrics I haven't defined, I haven't asked for. But we learned this in the market until they were comfortable with that data, that they didn't ask for, that they didn't define, that they didn't use the terminology. You still get coaches say, no, change it to our terminology. But the more they understand it, the more they're willing to use it. But how did they get to that point? They watched all this data that was put in against the video. They compared it to the data they'd already entered and said, you know what? After looking at this for about a year, maybe we don't have to break down this column anymore. We could use that third party potentially. Similar to that, the league data, right? You have all the different major leagues, and I love every year because Major League Baseball is really good at putting out a lot of really good stats. And so the majority of the research papers we see here every year, it's the richest data set from a league standpoint. You don't have as much of the subjective play calls, right? It is not what is the personnel formation, defensive coverage, defensive blitz, stunt game. A whole lot of subjective fields in other leagues. Baseball, Johnny's at bat. He's on the left side of the plate facing this pitcher. What's the pitch? That's the closest thing you have to your subjective field is, did I want to call it a sinker or a slider, right? So some of the leagues, really nice, but again, somebody else is making the rule on that data. So even though that data can be wonderful data, can be very consistent, when you go to relate to your coaches, your findings, do they agree with the way it was called? That's stuff where you have to communicate with these guys beforehand. Hey, let's go through some of these things, understand how they're making decisions, how they're using the data, because there may be fields in there where if they're not buying into it and it's the basis of your thesis, good night. You're going nowhere, right? So shift over from the observed metrics over to more the biometric, the kinesiology studies, right? This stuff has been done for a very long time, and there's a tremendous amount of use. Trainers, strength coaches are expected to stay up to date with how are we working the body? How are we making sure that we're tracking the right things and training these guys the right way? Typically done in a controlled environment, right? You have, let me simulate some part of what we're competing in. Is that cyclist on a stand being challenged to balance? No. So does it invalidate whatever you just studied? That's up to your coach to decide. Does the guy who's on an elliptical have any bearing in any sport whatsoever? I don't know. I don't know what they're trying to study here or not, right? Does the pitcher typically stand on a plywood mound? So there are some of these things where, depending on what I'm trying to determine, will your staff buy into this stuff, yes or no? And when I say staff, I don't distinguish between coaches and GMs. Staff is staff. You have decision makers that we are all trying to stay in the salary continuation program, right? I would like to get my next paycheck again. So what do I need to do to make sure I stay a firm member of that group? Well, understand that data, so when you relate to the coaches, don't get the Nick Saban gotcha, let me rip your butt for a while. I'd rather you guys have a successful, fruitful relationship for a long time, right? So when you're emulating those motions, you're taking pieces of it so that you can do a peer review of this stuff, right? I have to be able to say, here's what I observed, here's what you were able to determine from that. So traditional peer review, 2 criteria. Is it accurate? Yep, I hit the bullseye. Is it precise? Big scatter of data? No, I want a nice tight data so that I can say, I'm gonna hand you these results, you go out there, you're gonna get that same accuracy and precision when you do the same thing. So now my peers are gonna be able to come up with the same findings if this is valid data. For coaches, there's 2 more things they wanna see in this thing. I'll go back to no difference if you're in Saban's camp, Belichick's camp, which is really the Parcells camp, which is half of football. Everybody says in-game results are what I have to determine. Am I going to do it? Is it going to help me win a game? Because if you can't show me it's going to help me win a game, we don't have time for noise. Get out. Let's do something else. Right? So that's the peer review you're going to have is, yes, when you do this stuff, if you're a mathematician, I should be able to have another mathematician, and he can get that accuracy and precision on the same study that you did. But if you can't relate it to a coach, it doesn't really matter, because that's the peer that does matter, because he signs the bottom right corner of your paycheck, right? Again, salary continuation program. So today, where are metrics starting to go? That's kind of how we've been for the last 40 years. Well, things are changing fast today, right? Ball metrics. So we're lucky enough with the Catapult acquisition that some of the teams or companies that we worked with and they worked with, it's really nice that we've got this nice synergy of, we did totally opposite things. My company, sorry about that, is a video and data aggregation company. That's what we've been good at, and that's all we focus on. These guys are tracking a whole lot of metrics that you couldn't track before, right? How do I get it into the game, see the actual practice, see the actual game results, not observe metric, laboratory, where it actually rubber meets the road, right? So in the AFL, rugby, we've got a smart ball we're working with. We're starting to work with Wilson in the football space, collecting more data about the ball. Some of these things you can't observe. Some of the metrics are RPMs of the ball, velocity of the ball. I can say you threw it fast or slow, but I don't know the exact RPMs. Why does that matter? Well, that's where the studies come in, right? Is there a metric coming from this ball where I can show the coaches, hey, look, when I track this, it relates to this. Some of those fields that is it complete or incomplete? Coach, you've been tracking that for years. I can help determine that. Maybe we should work on this deficiency in our quarterback, right? In practice, in-game metrics that can be proven with in-game results. Biometric tracking. Again, these aren't complete lists. These are just a few easy examples. Heart rate is potentially the most important metric in the NHL because how long my shift lasts is based on when my heart rate gets over 165 beats a minute, I'm probably not absorbing a lot of oxygen right now, right? So 25 seconds into my shift, sit down, and look, he can recover that heart rate in less than 20 seconds. He's conditioned. Or the 2 minutes he's on the bench, he's still not down to an acceptable level. He's not ready to go. It's sport by sport, staff by staff. It's valid in-game, in-practice metrics. You have to determine with your staff, what is that threshold? Right? We're all about building the tools to help bring these things together, but it's always on your staff to determine what matters. Right? They're the guys making the millions of dollars that are going to help you determine, yeah, this is where we need to be spending our time. The big one, player tracking, right? Coaches love the positional data because it's not scary to them. I told Johnny to be here and run out to the numbers, and yeah, that's what he did. Okay, pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to translate. But right now, the only way that's being presented to them is typically, here's the eye chart, spreadsheets of numbers. What do we need to do with this stuff? Does it relate to what I'm coaching these guys up on? But then you can get into the true kinesiology studies of, as a company, we've had to go through and say, here's a very unique metric, player load. We're able to determine just how much wear and tear are you putting on these athletes. Are you preparing these guys right within a game? Are you preparing them across an entire week to make sure that we're peaking at game time? Are you training correctly across an entire season to make sure we're not wearing these guys out? We're not going overboard, and the last 3 weeks, we just got nothing left in the tank. Am I putting these guys at risk of injury? There's a lot of uses for this, but if a coach doesn't understand it, at best, you get, all right, this sports scientist is a smart dude. Says player load's telling us this, I believe in it. The coordinators go by what the head coach decided, but they're not sharing that data with their players. You have to understand it to teach it, right? So a lot of players only see the negative in it. Ooh, wait a minute, I don't know if I want them to know if I'm out of shape or not, so maybe we should push back of, we can train you better. We can keep you healthier. We can keep you in the league longer, right? That's why these metrics were built. but you need to be able to express it to the players, right? RHIEs, repeat high intensity efforts. Can I, as a really good player, oops, that's not the move I need to make, can I make another really quick move, do it again? So that I now want to be able to identify, are you an elite level athlete? If not, let's fix those deficiencies. Come on. IMAs. This one, again, I don't want to sit here and train our metrics. What I want to show is with all these metrics, what we did. I'll take the IMA as a specific example. So Glenn McIntosh developed this over a year using hours of video, showing specific moments and matching it to the corresponding data. So again, hours of video, matching it to the data. What do your coaches do 10 to 14 hours a day? What do your scouts do that same amount of time? What does your GM do? They sit in front of video 10 to 14 hours a day, and they'll compare it to the data that's there. And if it's not valid, they'll yell at the quality control coach, they'll yell at the GA, fix the data. Or if it's coming from these other systems, if I don't understand it, all right, work with me. Why is this determined? Why is this validated? Exact same process your staff goes through. That's what we're trying to do to make sure we have valid metrics. And when you put in front of a coach, great, you're tracking things I couldn't track before. And yes, it does match up with what I'm seeing on the field. Right? Validating your findings with your staff. So numbers show trends, right? Make whatever number you want, whatever eye chart you want. Coach, we believe the data shows this. What does the coach want to do? I want to watch the video. And that's what we've done for years of put all the data in against our video, take all this new data, put it in against our video, so now the coaches can validate for themselves. But then we also want to empower the coaches to make sure that relate in terms they understand. Right? One of the first things we did with the Catapult data is we built this module where sideline film, end zone film, what we call our radar view, it's a practice card. It's a whiteboard. Coaches draw X's and O's all day long. Might be a good idea for a name. So we take the most basic thing that they do all day, every day, we put a metric against it. Those paths, in this screenshot, it's velocity. And then we have the tool where we let the coaching staff say, when they cross 12 miles an hour, it should go from red to yellow. For when it goes over 18 miles an hour, you pick the colors, you pick the thresholds. That's where you and your staff, as everyone understands this, and then translates this to the athletes. If you say, Johnny, the data shows that you have a bad adductor, so we need to do some extra work in the weight room. Or I say, Johnny, let's look at the film. Every time you cut left, nice sharp cut. Every time you cut right, you gotta round it out. Do you believe that we could work with you to make sure you don't have a deficiency one way or another, right? Get that specific film example, get these real easy graphics. We can do 3D modeling with this stuff. We don't want to scare coaches off. A lot of these guys are a little old school. We want to make sure we can start from a level of comfort. Once they understand it, once they believe in it, they're going to teach it. Now you get that top to bottom buy-in, not sports scientist, head coach, decision. I'm mad because you're taking 30 plays of practice away from me a day and I'm trying to win a game and save my job. That's not what you want. You don't want guys fighting against you. We want to make sure that whatever you're relating to the staff is in terms they can understand, right? So what to research? This is the question we get all the time. Hey, what can I do so that my coach loves me? How do I find the Holy Grail? How can I be Prometheus and deliver fire from Zeus to my coaching staff? Well, you can't, quite honestly. You will first have to develop a relationship. The best way we've seen this done is addition by subtraction, meaning talk with your staff, figure out how they make decisions today. What are your decisions based on? Great. Let me go look at the analytics and let me see if I can validate or invalidate. Both are just as valuable. If you have a staff making decisions based on bad data and you can show that they need to stop that, you got better. And you related to your coaches, I understand what you're doing. I understand how you're working. Let's make sure that we're going to only do things that make us better as a group, right? So you're holding them accountable just like they're going to hold you accountable. Now you're becoming part of the team. You're not just, I don't know what that analyst in the corner does, whatever he says to me, it doesn't make any sense. Your main focus has to be, can I relate this data? Great, now let me show them what the findings actually mean. Because if you have really solid findings, the research papers in the hallway, I heard another speaker talk about, unfortunately a lot of those are going to die because no one's relating those to any team right now. And so if it's just an analyst understands an analyst and a coach doesn't know what it means, it's not valid data in this market. Accurate and precise aren't enough. Does it help in the game, right? So that peer review, is it accurate? Is it precise? Can my coaches comprehend the information? And if they can, will that give us a competitive advantage now? Because without that, it's falling on deaf ears. So thank you for the time. Happy to take any questions you guys may have. Bueller? Nobody? All right, well, thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it.